Hello, everyone. Welcome so much. Welcome to B52's new friend. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Liam. I'm the executive producer for PXR. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us today. Um, Today we have a real treat, actually. I'm really excited about this one. And I'm so excited to introduce our next presenter, here to talk to you about social VR. Dr. Andrew Simpari is a designer, researcher, and artist who grew up in text-based virtual worlds on an early internet. Anne has taught internationally and was previously a design researcher for IBM's Collaborative User Experience Group, and is currently the UX lead for immersive social platform VR Chat, the platform that we're in right now. So please throw your hands together, give me some woo-woos and some emojis for Anne. And you have the...
Woo-hoo. Hello, and thank you for being here. I'm glad to see that at least a few of you are here in headset, but before we begin, I'd like to ask you to try something that's a little bit odd, and that's to deliberately break the magic. Maybe close your eyes, but just notice for a moment that you're wrapped in technology. There's a computer strapped to your face, and it's a bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's still new and smells like plastic. In your hands are controllers, or maybe you're holding them just a bit awkwardly in front of you to make sure that your camera can track them. Or you're sitting in a desk chair, staring at a glowing rectangle, where a 6-foot-tall cartoon fox is addressing you from the stage. On the edge of your hearing is the space that you're actually in. Kids or coworkers or dogs outside. Just sit with this for a moment. Maybe take a breath, and then please come back here into this room with me. To open, I'd like to quote from Matrix director Lana Wachowski's HRC Visibility Awards acceptance speech. I know I am here because of the strength and the courage and the love that I am blessed to receive from my family and friends. And in this way, I hope to offer their love in the form of my materiality, so that this world that we can imagine in this world might be used to gain access to other rooms, to other worlds, previously unimaginable. Immersive VR is, by design and by nature, a first-person medium. You'll notice this the very first time that you try it. If you're used to your own body and you have regular and full access to your eyes and your ears, you'll hear the way that the room shifts. You'll see your perspective change. This is especially true if you try on an avatar that's much larger or smaller than you are in real life. I want to say here that you see the entire world change scale, but actually that's not quite the experience. The world doesn't really seem to change. The world is just different. Once you were sitting at a table with a coffee cup in front of you, but now you're leaning on a giant coffee cup, looking off the cliff edge of a table. This shift, this view out of your sensorium, isn't quite where it was before, but it doesn't have much bearing on your sense of being. You don't necessarily feel internally smaller or larger. The scale hits you when you look at your friends, and the more intimate the relationship, the better you know that body and their stance and their way of being, the more that you know how level their eyes are normally with yours, or how it feels to navigate your hand towards their palm, the more jarring the sensation. Strangers are merely giants. They're sometimes malicious, but often ignorant, taking steps without noticing you. Friends are accidental giants, and you'll find yourself wanting to gain attention, wanting their protection or their awareness. Conversely, if it's you who's now giant, you might find yourself standing very still indeed, until you've located all around you that you care about, and ensured yourself that you won't hurt them. Aware now that you're eye level with your friend's toe, you have a choice. The disorientation is real, but it belongs to you or it doesn't. If you find this confusing and upsetting, you'll probably leave, and if you find it delightful or intriguing, you'll stay. You'll explore until you find a virtual body that feels like you've always lived in it, and you'll move through this life in this form just to see what it means to do that. VR confronts you with your body, and it also confronts you with the idea that your body can be a choice. For some, this is empowering beyond words, and for others, it's a mistake or a confusion. I've spoken to people who feel at odds with their real-life body, and they find all of this really affirming. And I imagine that there are people who find a level of control like this magnifies or reinforces their dysmorphia. Most folks land somewhere along the spectrum, and all find it fairly novel to occupy an unfamiliar form. In any case, it occurs to me that this experiment in body choice is radical and significant in a way that far exceeds our current understanding of what any of this technology is actually for. Since we began this vast, awkward experiment of living networked lives online, we've been saying something like this, that online identity is for exploration and helps you try things out. It allows you to see things from a different perspective. In the 1960s, decades before there was an online to be had, sociologist Irving Goffman spelled out the importance of this, describing in theatrical terms what he called impression management. The very nature of human social interaction is context shifting. Certainly before this, since the dawn of humanity, we context switched, code switched, and masked our way through complex social environments for reasons that ranged from convenience to panicked survival. So we know this, we live it. But the digital version of this narrative has remained relentlessly and exhaustingly default, which is to say, mostly conveyed from the position of cis male and straight. Computer-mediated interaction is meant to be well-lit, bland, and normal. As the story goes, technology is neutral. On a good day, we tolerate some fringe. Maybe we might ask how it feels for a person who's born male and masculine presenting to temporarily slip the bonds, occupy the strange foreign land of femme, before returning safely to their natural order in their office. In most popular discourse, this seems to be where this discussion lands, and that is someone's valid question, I suppose, but it feels well answered, and it doesn't approach the mind-expanding diversity and intersectionality of race, language, gender, bodies, shapes, and identities that we can open our eyes to see us around in virtual worlds. It doesn't adequately describe what's happening, or why the ability to shift identity and to hold multiple truths is important. The popularity of social media over the last decade is an example of how this sometimes plays out. Facebook says it all. It's a book of faces. Identities tied to your government name, along with supporting photographic evidence. A single identity, timeline from birth to death. Originally founded as a hot or not website for college hookups by a white male Harvard dropout, Facebook has evolved into the most complex propaganda delivery and stalking machine in the history of the world. Central to its function is the idea that there is one, and only one, identity profile which can be linked to each human on the face of the planet. Facebook maintains profiles for its users across all the services that it offers, and the ones that it doesn't. Facebook even maintains shadow profiles for users that don't use the service, essentially naming the gaps between the interactions of known identities. As founder Zuckerberg famously said, quote, "You have one identity. The days of you having different an image for your work friends or your coworkers or for other people that you know are coming to an end pretty quickly. Having two identities for yourself is an example of a lack of integrity." Ad-driven social media enforces this policy further by requiring your online identity to be tied to your legal government name. The so-called real name policies briefly forced author Salman Rushdie off the internet for being a fake. And as with most policies designated for the default, the real name policy unequally impacted minority groups, those without the popular recognition of an author such as Rushdie, to a much more serious extent. Trans users found themselves needing to weigh access to their friends and family against dead-naming themselves in public and outing themselves to a potentially dangerous situation. Victims of domestic violence found they could no longer safely stay in contact with estranged family members. Authors and performers found that they couldn't perform. And I find it intriguing that most real name policy stands in direct contradiction to professional performance organizations such as the Screen Actors Guild, who maintain that, quote, "You cannot have the same name as another actor. When registering, you must come up with 3 names for yourself that you would be okay with using as your professional name in case someone registered is already using your name." At the forefront of the so-called NIM wars of the late 2000s were drag performers, who rely on identity and gender performance as both a way of living and a way of life. It shouldn't be lost that drag performers were on the front lines of Stonewall as well. Be gay, do crimes, Stonewall was a riot. There's also an idea that all of this is new, and that resistance comes from unfamiliarity, but I don't think that's quite true either. In one form or another, since the dawn of humanity, we've constructed, reconstructed, and performed. Queer people are not a new phenomena. Wishing to sculpt how people perceive you is as fundamental as human language. Pushback doesn't seem to come from an honest belief in essentialism, so much as a terror of understanding just how flexible we all are. So, I'd suggest humans almost universally understand the notion of context-specific identity and the power of gender representation, but we remain deeply ambivalent about it. In spite of nearly decades of living our lives in the gloom of the nobody knows you're a dog internet, we remain culturally uncomfortable with performance and performativity. We want it, but we don't want to be called out on it. In terms of theory of play, we require the line between the audience and the performer to remain sharp and bright. We like knowing which side we're on, and we often can't really appreciate the performance at all if the line blurs. It's fair to say that the degree to which we can see and feel the edge of what Johann Huizinga calls the magic circle of play determines a game's broad appeal. The brighter this line, the easier we find it to allow for the play to continue. The blurrier the line, the closer it is to what we call reality, the higher the stakes and the more dangerous and potentially threatening the environment feels. We can see this play out with the real name policy, and we can see it play out with online fandoms and roleplay. Having a hobby is seen as part of a balanced life. Being a fan of something is fairly normal. Being involved in fandom is somewhat peculiar. Converting your fandom to a lifestyle and then building your entire lived identity around it, that is a bridge too far for most. I think this explains in part why the popularity of social media exploded in the same time frame that participation in virtual worlds both became more possible and stayed relatively level. In 2017, Leslie Jameson explored this in The Atlantic, describing Second Life as, quote, the digital ruins of a forgotten future. And now, in 2023, we find ourselves again considering this future. Facebook is here, but it's a rudderless golem, huge, dangerous, shambling, while Meta has turned its sights to the, quote, failed future of the past, immersive VR. We continue to laugh and feel awkward about a flood of janky cartoon bodies that we see in VR, but we also describe it as a bit like the old internet, an echo of the web that we lost and we lamented through much of the last 5 years, and which will certainly not be replaced by the desperation of Web 3.0, but it must arrive from somewhere, if only because the horror of having sacrificed other forms of social interaction on the altar of the digital is terrifying to contemplate. So, Second Life failed in the same space of time that Facebook and Instagram and Twitter ate the world and then collapsed into a musky X. And virtual worlds are in ruins and the hottest new thing. But why? Why do we eagerly tune in our telephones to watch a real-time feed of the rich while simultaneously laughing at people buying virtual luxury for pennies on the dollar? Why are we so deeply curious about this thing that we can also gleefully mock? It's the same reason, I think. We know that performance is a performance, but we don't want to be called on it. We can feel how potentially false all of this is, but we still want our turn on the stage. When Zuckerberg tells us that having more than one identity is a sign of lack of integrity, most of us don't have a hard time agreeing because it is hard enough to maintain a single self, and maybe this lottery ticket is a winner. My Facebook name matches my driver's license, matches my tax form, matches my diploma, matches my credit card. It might all be false, but it is the false, the public, the single shared social current that we all swim in, which makes it real by fiat, which in a capitalist culture is the very definition of reality. The term identity theft has never really meant that, but only the acquisition of someone's payment credentials, and the story of social media and Web 2.0 traces this tension between the overwhelming tendency of everyone to construct an identity from bits of other lives, words, and songs, and the landlord's bellow that they own that and they deserve to be paid for your effort. If virtual worlds expand your ability to be in 1,000 mostly illegible ways, social media condenses real life down to a single, highly legible scoreboard. Very few of us will ever go viral, but everyone by now knows what it means to be the crowd in the shadow of a virus, a volatile center of attention that we all dance around. In this space, virtual worlds lean hard in the opposite direction. They embrace the idea that identity is fluid, constructed, and bricolaged from the exhaust of dominant realities. Virtual realities posit that fandom, cringy, off-putting, full of shibboleths, are a legitimate way to live. They propose that lives can be well wasted, that language choice matters and is fluid, and that identity belongs to you, and that while the future might have shattered into 1,000 pieces, each is a tiny queer universe to itself, boundless. There truly is no need to glue this back together to the frame we've left behind, and that thought can be terrifying to some. So, come back with me for a moment to that virtual table in a virtual kitchen, where some pills make you larger, some pills make you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. This is you in a body that you have selected among your chosen family. You're eye level with your friend's foot, and this is delightful, or it's disorienting, or both. This is first person, but if you're a video game enthusiast or an avid reader of novels, you might start to find the button that tries to put you into third-person view, which is a more comfortable method of occupying and navigating a body that isn't quite yours yet. From that perspective, you could see your character as the player, and you could move about as a puppet. You'd have agency, but proxied through a mask that you can observe. You go looking for this option in immersive VR, and you fail, because there is no third-person mode. In fact, you can't see yourself at all. You only see your hands, or your hand proxies, your paws, or your tentacles, or cubes on sticks in front of you. You need a mirror, and you go looking for one, a frame of reference to help reflect you back into a larger context, to provide some boundaries to help make all of this make some kind of sense. For similar reasons, immersive VR is difficult to photograph. There are technical issues. For starters, the headsets we wear are specifically designed to track head movement and as close to real time as possible. And that means that any feed directly from the user's point of view comes across like a face-mounted body cam. It tracks the gaze of the viewer, jittering around the edges, rapidly bouncing from face to object, distance to object again. This view utterly fails to document the experience of being in VR, but it rather documents the physical and mental actions of the person who's wearing the headset. From this footage, you can tell which elements of a world caught a person's attention and in what sequence. You can somewhat tell what captures their focus and what distracts them, but you cannot really feel or convey what it means to be inside the world that they're in. In Hamlet on the Holodeck, author Janet Murray offers a revised take on Samuel Taylor Coleridge's suspension of disbelief. Quote, "When fans are able to explore the world, to ask questions of it, and to discover new and consistent facts about it, then their belief increases as a result of their actions, and they experience the active creation of belief. This rings true, but by the same contract, audience members must agree to the bounds of the play established by the world creator. They must stay on the intended path and frame their actions within the magic circle. The less clear this is, the more the illusion blurs, and the more unsatisfying the experience." In the early 2000s, when we still remembered a world before the web, Wired writer Chris Anderson wrote an article that became a book called The Long Tail: Why the Future of Business is Selling Less of More. The long tail described what would soon become the blueprint for the next 2 decades. Rather than specialize or service a local community, more money could be made in casting as big a net as possible over the most diverse of special interest groups. Anderson pointed specifically at the music industry, suggesting that rather than concentrating on a handful of top 40 hits, a more lucrative business could be built by selling a whole lot more smaller, obscure content to niche communities. The key to making this work was an instant, international, and nearly free distribution infrastructure, the internet. For non-rivalrous digital content, such as music and later video, the move was swift. It brought us Netflix, Spotify, numerous other similar streaming platforms. For physical goods, the infrastructure did take a little longer to build out, but the Amazon saw to it, and it's perhaps better thought of as the world's largest logistics firm rather than the online bookstore that it began as. Not content to take advantage of these economies of scale across existing affinity groups, the same infrastructure has been used to create and force multiply previously insignificant groups into publics with real power to influence the world. The primary goal of this is commerce and advertising, but the consequences were far-reaching. The new economy brought us Taylor Swift and Beyoncé's Lemonade, and helped many of us survive the pandemic. It also brought us Occupy and Me Too and the Arab Spring, and a resurgence in white nationalism. The United States moved from a country where homosexuality was outlawed in places to one where marriage equality is enshrined in federal law, bringing trans issues to the forefront, while simultaneously fomenting a massive wave of misogyny and transmisogyny, the forced birth movement, and widespread sexual repression. At the moment, we remain in a state where queer communities have never been more visible and better connected, while also seemingly teetering on the brink of fascism. The pride flag is a well-recognized brand, an annual celebration of joy that is also a hashtag, and a demographic category, funneling energy away from the fact that we are still very much in the middle of a riot. Roughly 2 years after Spotify came online as a service, Microsoft computer scientist and designer Bill Buxton wrote an article called The Long Nose of Innovation, positing that there was a mirror image of the long tail that he called the long nose. Using this model, Buxton proposed that the bulk of the work in understanding how to significantly apply a new technology takes place for a decade or decades before the real impact is seen. Buxton writes, "What the long nose tells us is that any technology that is going to have significant impact on the next 10 years is already at least 10 years old, and any technology that is going to have significant impact in the next 5 years is already at least 15 years old, and it's likely still below the radar." Here in 2023, we find ourselves at the end of a 20-year unregulated international experiment in the web as platform. We moved much of our lives and nearly all of our cultural production online and into network publics, primarily in the form of a handful of private websites that often think and act like nation-states, but with a less clear and far more dangerous relationship to the communities and principles of governance of the communities that they contain. The network is made of unruly people, but having built this future, social media companies have come to believe that they own their citizenry. Meta sponsors the creation of immersive VR headsets and is well known, renamed their entire company in a bid to get ahead of this curve. In many ways, this move was pure economics, Facebook's Web 2.0 networked model, where they relied on the hardware of potential competitors to data mine online behavior, is a dying industry. It remains extremely lucrative, but the various publics caught in the Web 2.0 net are getting wise, and this subjects their earnings to the whims of those who might value privacy in a different way. There's significant movement away from collapsing our identities completely into a single feed, and there's significant disagreement that negotiating different social contexts necessarily constitutes lack of integrity rather than, say, normal and healthy human interaction. In 2022, Apple integrated privacy features which prevented tracking in certain circumstances, and this reportedly cost Facebook over $12 billion in lost revenue. It's no wonder that companies, including Apple, are working on a play that directly connects their products to your body using hardware that they control. When launching in Europe, Meta acknowledged some of these privacy concerns by removing the requirement that you register a social media account to use a Quest headset, but given that researchers have shown that you can de-anonymize someone wearing a VR headset using 5 minutes of head movement data with 95% accuracy and off-the-shelf tools, having a registered account is the least of your worries. All you need to do is to speak out loud or move your body, and we will know what to sell you. If you live long enough to see something of your past come back as a trend, about 20 years will do it, then you'll start to experience nostalgia, or the pain of unrequited homecoming. Undoubtedly, this is old people talk, and you might not remember the trend in recent years among early internet pioneers to publicly mourn the web that we lost, which comes along with descriptions of newer technologies such as immersive VR as something like the old internet. While there is much to appreciate in these reflections, these expressions ultimately feel shallow and counterproductive over time, less like expressions of regret of who we might be, and more like expressions of longing for missed business opportunities, no longer open for exploitation. Along the route, scattered in the contrail of the long nose, are communities of care and innovation, each quietly building out and maintaining their own universes for their own people, without feeling the need to plug those into a mythological public the size of the entire globe. These networks, identified as weak ties at global scale, are in fact strong ties at local scale, and potentially form networks of resilience far stronger than their visible nodes might imply. I'm particularly heartened at the overlap between retro-tech communities, folks who find and restore and archive lost technical knowledge and evolutionary dead ends, and queer communities of mutual aid. Certainly not all of these folks who are interested in old computers are queer, and not all of them consider their work to be anything more than pleasant distraction. But there's something about understanding and caring for artifacts that belong to a different time, which feels less like nostalgia and more like duty of care. You can see this in the practice of sourcing and rebuilding components, getting up early on a weekend to stoke a steam boiler, or precisely match a shade of paint, or perhaps build out an entire archive of lost zines for no reason other than someone might need it someday. This thing is special to me and my 5 friends. Someone else might come across this and feel less alone. The people I know who will spend their time and money running a long-forgotten machine from the turn of the century, or listen to music on records that are older than they are, seem less interested in pining for an imaginary past than they are in imagining an alternate future, where, for instance, you can listen to music without it counting on your permanent record. Really, imagine playing an album for a room full of people without automatically notifying the authorities, registering your preference, or influencing the song's chart position. Simply listening for pleasure, because you enjoy it, you think your friends might too, and you'd rather just tell them that yourself than post it to your feed. In immersive virtual worlds, I'm heartened by the fact that we're seeing the emergence of computer-mediated communication that strongly encourages synchronous, face-to-face communication in an environment where it actually becomes somewhat difficult to extract value at scale. Virtual worlds promote a non-rivalrous universe. It doesn't cost you more to go to a copy of an exclusive virtual club than it costs me, and everything about that environment is identical. Travel costs are the same. What is different is the people who you are with, and the bonds that you form, and this seems appropriate and more human scale. The only real thing that we have to lose is time, and where and with whom we choose to spend it. Social media, primarily asynchronous, promises the impossible, that you can live multiple lives in parallel by making better use of your time. Rather than a wasted bus ride, you can use that time to craft an Instagram report or increase your clout score. Social media is fundamentally aspirational. It's content production. It's performance as a job. Immersive VR is quite different. Rather than spend the time performing your online self for points, it asks you to spend real time disconnected and untracked, focused only on interacting with the people in front of you, using your voice of choice and your body of choice, one conversation at a time. This seems like a healthy return to me, social media as a social bond rather than friend count, and discussions that might proceed more slowly, face to face, without the cut and paste of encyclopedic memory of online discourse. Ownership here also requires forgetting, and histories that are allowed to fade like snapshots make for online social interactions that are better and more like our imperfect analog lives. Deeper, richer, more ephemeral. Finally, I'm heartened that the primary early adopters of immersive social technology seem to overwhelmingly fall into overlapping constellations of queer, disabled, and neurodivergent communities who often negotiate visibility for personal safety, and fandoms who often negotiate visibility and identity for the pleasure of it. These communities often resist commercial exploitation because, in spite of the lessons of Web 2.0, they remain uncomfortably weird for mainstream audiences. And yet, it's these folks that are putting in the work, building a better future for themselves and their friends. Cultural critic and art historian Dave Hickey writes in his essay Romancing the Looky-Loos, quote, "At this bedrock level, the process through which works of art are socialized looks less like a conspiracy than a slumber party. The whole process, however, presumes the existence of artists who are comfortable with this tiny local social activity, who are at ease with the gradual lateral acquisition of constituencies, and understand that the process can take place anywhere, and if successful, command attention everywhere. The musical vogue of Prince and his entourage, of the Allman Brothers Band and their compatriots, and of Seattle grunge testify to the efficacy of this process. It only requires artists who would rather socialize their work among their peers, horizontally, at the risk of ire, than to institutionalize it vertically in the hopes of largesse. A ghost is unfinished business. In caring for dead tech, the caretakers are not looking for a return, but a satisfactory resolution. A vision of an unrealized future that is present in the past, a bit of the long tail that isn't dead as not sufficiently explored. In exploring identity online, communities and fandoms aren't necessarily looking to prove that their niche is better, they're simply looking to live the way that they see fit, with permission to explore among the like-minded. I want to believe that this vision of a disparate networked village is our future, as it bodes well. We can shatter the vision of a single identity existing in a single frame, and in its place we might find 1,000 complete worlds, stronger and better connected, and more resilient than ever before. Thank you.
Yeah, it's time for a little Q&A, maybe. Yeah, a little Q&A.
So everybody want to get a bit closer, maybe?
Yeah, if everyone wants to get a bit closer, and we have another conch because we're generous that way. We have a question conch, so Andrew can have this conch, and other members of the PXR team can have a question conch. Would anyone like to ask Andrew a question or give Andrew a comment of that incredible presentation we just viewed? If so, just make a little lineup, because we are quintessentially Canadian. Make a little lineup in front of the conch, and let's jam for a couple of minutes if you have time. Anne, is that okay? Yeah, great. Yeah.
I'm feeling very far away from y'all, though.
In front of the conch.
Go for it, Danish. Why don't you, just hop in, and anyone that wants to go after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi. That was amazing. Do you have like a book or anything that you wrote?
I do
I'll
not.
buy it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any theses? Any theses? Are you published?
I mean, I haven't written a book. I have a newsletter. I have a dissertation that I wrote a couple of years ago and never published. So I'm pretty bad at publishing, to be honest. And I teach courses regularly, but at theater schools in Switzerland, so that may not be accessible.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, I'll find your newsletter.
But yeah, happy.
Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I joined a bit late, but I was listening on the stream earlier. I hadn't known you would be talking about fandom, but I'm otherwise pleased to show up in my Dalek avatar.
Exterminate.
Exactly. I love what you said about loosely networked local communities not seeking that sort of vertical global public. I wonder about your thoughts on how we can reconcile that with like the inescapable fact that so many of the computers that we have on our faces are owned by Meta or by HTC or if somebody has several $1,000s by Apple, like how do we navigate the fact that the people on the ground in the systems are operating on this local level, but are in a very grounded hardware way reliant on these mega corporations?
Yeah, I love that question because it bothers me, and I don't have a good answer for you. No, but to back up a bit, so the thing is, like, a lot of the early revolutions of technology where this sort of thing was sort of new, like, I don't know, from home recording to zine making to BBSs, like it was almost always possible, even if it took a lot of time, effort, or money, to build your own, right? You could always go dumpster dive, you could always, I don't know, steal something, like you can always make your own. And the one kind of weird thing about immersive VR is, as you said, the only real on-ramp, at least to the immersive part, are these pretty complicated, expensive headsets that are really difficult to make. It's like, it isn't impossible, by the way. There are people on the internet who make their own headsets, but I don't know, that's like making your own vacuum tubes. Totally doable. I have great respect, but not everyone's going to be able to set up, that thing in their basement. I don't know the answer to that other than the observation. It's just an observation that the communities of practice exist, again, in relationship and in parallel to the technology, but they are not the technology itself. Like, the headsets could go away, VR chat could go away today. We would all still be here, and we would still make theater, and we would still find our people. It's going to be different. But I think that's the best that I personally have at the moment. It's not the best answer, but that's where I sit, is like, we just have to focus on the fact that those are the things that count and try to find our way forward. And if you can figure out a way to make a headset at home, let me know, because I'll buy one or I'll set one up.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Anybody else? Have
Anyone
anything
else? Yeah.
I mean, I just have a comment. I found that like really, really, like it made me feel quite emotional to hear you speak about just like the power of online community and like the fluidity of identity, as someone that spent a large portion of the pandemic in online communities and feeling the impact of that. So yeah, thank you. It was a really beautiful talk. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may. Forgive me if this is a little too brass tacks, but do you have any sort of like 3 simple action items? Like, you know what I mean? If someone wants to engage and create and sort of nurture these communities that you're talking about, is there any piece of wisdom you can say, like, remember this simple lesson? Do you know what I mean? Like keep these caveats in mind. I know. Sorry, I'm not trying to give you the condense your presentation. Good. Yeah, but like every day, remember this, and that might serve us in good stead to create the future that we should be shepherding towards. Do you know what yeah, sorry if that was a bit convoluted. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it makes sense, and it's also good, and I wish I was that pithy. If I was, I wouldn't take 25 minutes to talk. No, I'm joking with you. I don't have these like 3 bullet points of wisdom. I guess the one thing, like the kind of lesson learned for me, was to is to try to kind of like deprogram your head a bit. This is a note from me to my past self. It's really tempting to try to put your work into the kind of prevailing framework, which, especially, not exclusively, but especially over the last 20 years, is like, your work doesn't matter if it doesn't reach 1 million people. Right. It's this really like, it's the social media thing. Like, you didn't go viral, it's a waste. And that's kind of all the way down from like companies to interpersonal. And I just like try not to do that. Try to find a group of folks for which your work matters. And if that's 1 person, that's significant. If it's 10 people, that's incredible. If it's 100 people, man, you're doing amazing. And that really matters. And the trouble with that, though, is that holding onto that can be hard. So you need the same community support to do that, because the powers that be will always tell you, oh yeah, your tiny little theater thing doesn't matter. But like, it totally matters. Like, that's the only advice I can give.
All right. Thanks so much, and thanks for that. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say or comment on?
Check the live stream if there are any.
Yeah, go for it.
Please write a book. I want your book.
You want me to write a
That's
book?
all.
All right, I'll write a.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll write a book for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple of people who are trying to make it over from the whale, so I don't know if they're gonna have anything.
Oh, cool. Oh, whale teleports.
From the checking the Discord.
I got something if that's okay.
Oh yes, go for it.
Hey, and hey, just what you were talking about kind of had me thinking. I use the term to like, you know, not. I forgot exactly what you just said, but it reminded me of like, you know, decolonizing your mind. You know, we're living in a post-colonial world. We have a lot of these institutions and like things that are set up that just because someone set them up to benefit them doesn't mean they benefit everyone, and that we don't always need to think like with those at our backs all the time or supporting us. You know, you were saying how if you don't reach 5, 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, it doesn't matter. You've reached one person or two people and you've made it matter to them, and like so that should matter to you. And just that, like, you know, reality, or when you think about it, it all comes down to the capitalist, you know, money thing, that people feel that their work doesn't matter because they haven't reached 100 people because they didn't make enough money off of it or whatever, right? Like the monetary value to it seems to like really control and drive people in a way. And we saw that the internet was like almost stolen from those people or taken from those people that were trying to make it fun and stuff like that and just have somewhere to hang out and, you know, make a community. And it was taken and used to monetize, and, you know, like you were talking about with Facebook, take people's identities and monetize them even more and stuff like that. And with, you know, VR and face-to-face experiences like this, you get to, you know, create a community again that is away from all this, you know, money grabbing corporate BS that exists in the world now, and just get to hang out, right? Like, and make a community of people that are, you know, share interests. So
Yeah.
I loved your presentation. I just wanted to say that too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do generally agree with that. Like I do, and I really don't like that is absolutely, I think, most important and sustaining thing is like finding your way to feel good about what you do for your community. I mean, the other practical part of this, which is a very fair sort of criticism back to me, is like you also have to eat. So how does that work? I don't have great answers. I don't have great answers there either. As a designer, I try to lean into complexity. And if anybody is in a position or finds themselves in the future in a position where you are one of these funding persons, right? Try to keep that in mind, I guess. I do think that we need to get ourselves as culturally, internationally, out of this mindset of I don't want to fund this thing if it doesn't have 1 million people. Like we have to change that. The other kind of dumb metaphor I have is like nobody really starts a bakery because they want to be acquired by Hostess. Like that's kind of a weird thing, right? Like I like Hostess pies actually, and I like fresh baked bread, but like it's not the same thing. And so that we also have to try to shift our heads a bit. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be paid for your work. You should be paid for your work, like 100%. And there are other people, not me, right? Like lots of people who are thinking of ways of making that sustainable. The fandom thing I really like. There's some work on this, but also just if you look at any like furry convention, the economics of that are really interesting because fan economies are self-sustaining. And not just furries, right? I mean, AnimeCon, like there's so many fan communities in general tend to have a different concept of value and how you can self-sustain folks. And so a lot of those things actually saw boosts during, say, COVID, rather than fall apart in the face of having like us all be on Zoom. It was like, actually we're online, so we're going to create like, so Furality is a furry convention that is the most attended furry convention in the world, and it happens in VR chat, and it benefited a lot from that. But that was sort of the message there, right? Is like, as a friend of mine who works for an organization called the New Design Congress said, like most of us were being really sad about Zoom, and the furries were like, we're going to build a convention. Like, right? So there are different approaches to the same problem. We all need to eat. But I think we can find it. I think we can find our way to that. I think we're capable of doing it. We just have to work on it. Also, don't feel bad. Yeah. Be rich. Just be rich. Everyone, just be rich.
Be rich and make art.
That's it. It's easy.
Thanks, Anne, and thanks, Mitch. I'm mindful that we're coming up to the hour.
Oh yeah.
Anyone else that would like to jump in before we wrap this incredible presentation? Any of the newcomers that just joined us on the Squid want to come in and say anything? Okay. Well, Well, and here, I'll use the infrastructure that exists. And thank you so much for this incredible presentation. A round of emojis for this for our wonderful presenter. You've given us a lot to think about, so thank you so much. Round of emojis, everybody, and woo woos if you'd like. Woo woos are acceptable. Woo woo.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. For those of you who are on the squid, there is a dolphin taxi at the end of the squid to take you back to B52, the whale.